don't mind, tell me a little bit about your mom and dad. You know, because the Fardinks are well known in our community.
Well, if your last name is Fardink, we're probably related, maybe third, fourth, fifth cousin removed, okay? Because two brothers came over and settled in Clymer with all the other Dutchmen, the I-N-K, and the end of the name, you know, Fardink. And from there it all started. But part of that family moved to the Asheville area. And you might remember the farm in Asheville Bay. It's still there, where the trolley car coming out of Jamestown would stop there. And it was called Fardink Stop, right there in Asheville Bay. And there was a sawmill across. There was a steam-powered sawmill. And there are pictures that still exist of that I put in the marina, so anybody that's visiting could see that. Do you remember that sawmill by chance? It was steam-powered. Oh, it made a heck of a racket when it was running. I remember it as a kid. But anyhow, that was my grandfather. My great-grandfather ran that, and he had a son, Bert, who had a son, Merle, and Harold. And Merle was my father, okay? And he worked very hard. He worked very hard. He worked 6 days a week. Some of you in the audience might have used Fardink blacktopping at one time, and he was very proud of that because he did quality work. You know, he showed me the ropes, and I'd help him on Saturdays if I wasn't playing football or something for Panama. And he took no shortcuts, and he was proud of that. And people still, when I meet them, ask about Fardink blacktopping, you know, and the great job my dad did. And I'm proud of that.
Now, where did you live?
On Fardink Road.
up on the hill, or were you on the flat there?
Yeah, where it comes up and then it's on the flat. And my dad built that house out of lumber, actually, that was sawn in at sawmill in Asheville Bay. So it's rough-hewn lumber if you really look at the structure of it. Came out of that sawmill. And he did it all himself, built the house himself. That's what a lot of my family did back then. They'd build their own homes. They were just a very industrious group. They taught me a lot, you know, on the farm that my other uncle had there, you know.
Now, when you came over here, have you traced back the immigration from Holland?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I got interested in genealogy, and I can go quite a ways back in Holland, you know. And they came from Winterswijk, up on the German border, you know, where a lot of World War II ended up being fought, you know, with the 101st, 82nd Airborne when they dropped into Vielseck and some of those drop zones along the German border there. That's where they came from, yeah. And the name Ink, you know, Fardink, Becker Ink, you know, it's sort of like Jamestown Swedes, you know, with the S-O-N. But Ink determined you were from someplace, a farm typically, from this farm or something. That's what it kind of means, yeah.
So you grew up, obviously, a Asheville area, Panama Central School?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Grew up in Asheville Elementary through grade 6, which is long gone now. Yeah. Yeah. And then Panama, you know, 7, 8, high school. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know the status of it currently, Paul, but Asheville General at some point was owned by the Resource Center.
That's true, yeah. The Asheville School was owned by the Resource Center, yep. And they had their daycare facilities there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they still own it?
No, it's gone. The school is gone, yeah. I guess they looked at it, and the heating system, it was a boiler system. And again, you got a boiler system in a sawmill or a school, you're going to have troubles passing inspection with New York State anymore, you know. And they had that. And they found asbestos throughout the building, so it's gone. The building's gone.
I remember working with Mike Raymond, just sidebar on all of that crazy stuff. And so you are in Panama, but I know you're quite the jock. So sports, was that a good part of your high school career?
I tried to play as many of the sports as I could. In fact, our football team, Eddie Triscutt, you may know Eddie Triscutt. Sure. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience do. He and I were co-captains of Panama's first undefeated 8-0 football team. But back then, this is the fall of '65, there were no playoffs. You know, you didn't go to Rich Stadium or do anything. You know, the last game, you won it, it's over, season's over. And the year before, we were undefeated. So it was quite a legacy to Jack Keeney, really. Jack was one heck of a coach. And later on, he was probably one of my very best friends, Jack Keeney. When he was inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame here in Chautauqua County, I had the honor of you know, being part of that induction and doing the actual write-up for that. But great person, yeah.
Football, but did you do
baseball,
baseball,
track? Yeah, I did all of that. No basketball though. I didn't do basketball. You know, for Mr. McElrath, people, you know, in Jamestown, McElrath's a legend, but boy, he started at Panama, and he'd go to the Odd. Remember, back then you would go to the Buffalo Odd, you know, for the playoffs, and he went year after year after year. Just incredible teams, incredible coach. And I'll say this about James McElrath: he was 7th and 8th grade English. And okay, here's my reading list, folks. There's no Bobbsey twins on my list. It's Steinbeck, Hemingway, or Faulkner. So I got into all those, and I still read them to this day, you know. And what an English teacher. He'd had you up on the board, you know, diagramming sentences. Who diagrams sentences anymore, you know? Dangling participles, you know? I could still do that. That was great fun. It was. He made it a sport, you know? Great teacher, you know. I know he's a great coach, but he was a great teacher, too. Made me fall in love with English literature. Yeah, yeah.
So, who some of the other teachers of note? Because I know you're really fond of Panama. That's a warm spot for Paul Fardink.
Because, you know, as you know, I ended up going to West Point, and I was worried about coming from a small school and being competitive, because there were some real brainy guys there. But as it turned out, it wasn't an issue. You know, well prepared. Obviously, I graduated. But no, some of the other people that I thought very highly of was Veer Lindquist. You know Veer Lindquist, I'm sure. He's a well-known name in Jamestown. Great teacher, algebra, geometry, advanced trig, all those. In fact, sophomore, was it trig? Yeah, anyhow, there were 12 of us in the class, and I think all 12 of us maxed the Regents exam. He was that good a teacher, and he made it fun. Again, he made it fun and challenging, you know. And another one was Durwood Swanson. Durwood is still with us, you know. Great guy there, too. And there's probably one more I should mention, if I can. Durwood Swanson, he was the JV coach for football, and really cared about the kids, really cared about them, yeah.
And what year did you graduate from Panama?
1966.
And then is your selection process, we know you selected West Point, was that a logical choice for you, or was there other, I mean, how did that process work?
I went to Boys State, thank you to the Asheville Legion. Asheville had an actual American Legion post. 1676, which is long gone. They were all WW2 vets that came back, and they sent me to Boys State when I was a junior. And I met some West Point cadets there. And they did a presentation at Boys State, and I became very interested in them and the academy, especially what they had to say. So I pursued, you know, a competitive appointment with Charles E. Goodell. Yep. And I didn't get the appointment. I got a letter from West Point, you're fully qualified. It was quite an extensive testing back then. I had to go to Phoenixville. It's the big VA hospital north of Philadelphia by Valley Forge. I was there a week, and extensive testing, physical, 2 days of physical testing, you know, medical physical testing. Another one just on your abilities as an athlete, you know, different kinds of tests with that. And then you actually sat there and you took the SATs again, and they sent all that. So you were there for quite a while. Anyhow, they came back from West Point, you're fully qualified but no admittance. A young man from Randolph who wasn't even here. His dad was in the military, a full colonel. Yeah, so obviously the son was traveling about, but Randolph was their home of record. Bucky Dunwoody got the nomination from Senator Goodell at the time. So, but then I graduated from Panama on the 27th of June. About the 24th, my parents got a call from West Point. Hey, there's an opening. Your son's a qualified alternate. Can he be here? So what are you going to say? Yeah. So, I mean, that's how it happened. By the way, Bucky Dunwoody ended up being my classmate. His sister, Ann Dunwoody, from Randolph, was the Army's first four-star general. First four-star general, yeah. And I've corresponded with her, you know, just, in fact, I gave you a copy of the Cody paper, and she credits Cody with ensuring that she'd get her 4th star, because, you know, like everything else in this world, got all tangled up in politics. Yeah, there's politics among those generals. Who's going to pick the generals? And but he fought for her, and she became a 4-star because of that. So, you know, there's some really great history, military history in this area, you know.
Let me pause for a second. So the first female 4-star general in the Army has a source of Randolph, New York.
Yeah, Randolph. Yeah, that's where's her home of record. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Whoa, I know it. I know it. So when you get into this stuff, you start researching it. You know, I write a lot of these history papers for the, and a great person too. Great person. Ann Dunwoody. Yeah.
You know, just while we're even, it's on record here, we should figure a way to get her.
Get her here. Oh, I'm sure she'd come back. Yeah. Right now, I think she's in Florida. I think she lives in Florida.
She's retired?
She's retired now. She's a retired general. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll work on it.
Yeah. 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 She must still have family, I would think, in the area. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're going to West Point. You've been done all the prep work, but all of a sudden was this the first time when you actually walk on to the base or, you know, campus? What's your reaction?
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely correct. You'd never do that today, you know, with your sons or daughters. You always take them to colleges and let them look around. And, I kind of liked, no, I walked in there cold. I'd never been to the place, and but I'd heard so much about it, and I figured that, you know, that was something I wanted to do. And my parents dropped me off, and there was cadets standing there, all seniors, you know, with the red sash. Go report to the man in the red sash. And all hell started right there that second, you know, for the next year as a plebe at West Point. Because it was one of the hardest years of my life because of the way it was back then. Yeah. When you were a plebe, you were, I won't say you weren't a nobody, but you were close to being nobody. Yeah, compared to what you went through. Because every place you went for a year, you double timed. If an upperclassman walked by you in the hall, you threw yourself against the wall, you know, and went into a brace position. You were required to memorize all kinds of ridiculous poop, you know, and like the daily menus or the movie schedule in the theaters and stuff like that. And they'd stop you and ask you to spout that stuff off. And if you couldn't do it, like I say, all hell break loose, you know, because then they'd gang up on you. So it was quite a plebe year. That's all changed now, you know, because especially when you had to brace. You know, where you had to tuck your chin against your, right in against your back there. And a lot of it was not good. It's not good. Today, they've completely outlawed bracing. They've outlawed a lot of that stuff because they just said, you know, this was more fraternity harassment rather than leadership development. And today, thank God, it's completely flipped where it's about leadership development, you know. So it's much better than it was in the 60s. And remember also, it was all male back then too, so there was a lot of testosterone, you know, it's just competitiveness, you know. Because when you graduated in 1970, you had your choice of the combat branches. You had to either be infantry, armor, artillery, you know, and you had to go to airborne and ranger. You know, they were really adamant about creating warriors. You know, that's what they wanted. Oh, and by the way, back then you all went to Vietnam. So, you know, yeah.
Hazing, a term which
hazing.
Is strictly, to me, it was fraternity stuff, and it sounds like that was ongoing. Was there a point where it ended? I mean, where it had to stop?
It had to stop when the seniors graduated. You know, it was the June week graduation, and there was a June week parade. And all the seniors would line up and the upperclassmen, and then you'd march down the line and they'd all shake your hand and call you by your first name. Then it was over. Then you were part of the Corps. Wow. You really were.
So it was a year.
It was a year of this stuff. Yeah.
Was there a certain degree of washout?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember the first 2 months known as the Beast Barracks. Beast Barracks, because it was a beast. You lost a lot of candidates then, you know, because I can remember guys saying, hey, I didn't sign up for this. I'm going to go to college somewhere, you know. And yeah, it went on for a year, the whole year. Yeah, it was tough stuff. It was. And there was, I think on July 1st, 1966, there was about 1,200 of us signed in. And when school started, we'd already lost like 150 in September of 66. And then by the time we graduated, it was 750. But after school started, academics is what really got, you know, a lot of the attrition after that, was the attrition because of academics, especially math. You know, because when everybody graduated from West Point back then, there was one degree. It was military engineering, and you had all kinds of math, you know, starting with calculus and advanced calculus, you know. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And that's the one that got people, was the math courses, yeah.
Did you feel prepared?
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah, I struggled with the math, you know, because at the time there was no calculus at Panama. And some of my fellow classmates, they did have calculus, you know, in some of the bigger schools that could do it at the time. But I think that's pretty standard in a lot of schools now, is the teaching of calculus. Yeah, yeah.
Did you get required to play, I know you had physical activities, but athletics were intercollegiate stuff?
Yeah, if you didn't play intercollegiate, you were required to participate in intramurals. Mm-hmm. Yep, and there were all kinds of intramural teams, and it was very competitive because all the cadet companies, all 32 of them, had intramural teams, and there was all kinds of championships, you know, brigade championships. So, yeah, I mean, you name it, and there was a sport there, basketball, football, track, everything, you know, intramurals, and extremely competitive. Yep, as was the actual gym courses, you know, during freshman year. You had to pass swimming. And guys would show up and they couldn't swim, so they'd be in what was called the rock squad. You know? Because, you know, part of the graduation from swimming was you're in full uniform with combat boots, and you got this M1 rifle, and you had to bounce across the bottom of the pool to get to the other side. Yeah, but swimming and wrestling, everybody was required to take wrestling. Everybody was required to take boxing. Oh, I can tell you, Greg, I remember 3-day headaches after boxing. And intramurals, you know, I felt, well, I'll do that for intramurals. You know, I'll be competitive in the brigade sports here. And I was on the boxing team. But boy, you get these 3-day headaches and bloody noses. Oh, my God. Yeah. And the fourth requirement freshman year was gymnastics. Now, I didn't really care for gymnastics. I didn't really care for that. But, you know, I passed all 4 of those. So, yeah. But unbelievable, you know, you could get dismissed if you didn't pass your gym classes. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they were strict on all that. You had to pass everything.
On occasion, did they bring out the alumni? Did you ever see the 3-star generals, the 4-star generals during those early years, sort of the celebrity Army officers? Were they, did that?
Yes, you would, but it's changed a lot. You know, today they really encourage, you know, folks like me coming back and mingling with the cadets and talking about experiences. Not so much back then, but you did see them, you know, usually at parades. They'd be out there standing in review, you know, with the superintendent and stuff. Or they'd be in the mess hall during lunchtime, because the mess hall could suit the whole Corps of Cadets, and they'd be up on this poop deck, and they'd usually address the Corps, you know, about experiences or encouraging them to beat Navy, you know, all that good stuff, you know. Yeah, I can remember Bob Hope being there, meeting him. That's one I particularly remember, because you know, he was such a great guy when it came to the military and all his overseas travels and shows. Yeah.
It's a total sidebar. I never thought about it, but I was at Carlisle, went to law school there, and of course that's the War College.
Yep.
And Army War College. And on a couple of occasions, Pete Dawkins.
Oh yeah.
Was there, and I met him. Just, I mean, he's a celebrity, Pete Dawkins, and they had General of World War II General, might have been Curtis LeMay. Anyways, at the War College, and just sort of there, you know.
Yep, Pete Dawkins was there on the instructor when I was there. Mm-hmm. So we saw a lot of Pete Dawkins, and he was referred to as St. Pete.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Why? He was the first captain. He was the top cadet when he graduated.
Was he really?
Yeah, and he got the Heisman.
Yeah.
He was a Heisman, and he was a Rhodes Scholar. Can you imagine all that rolled into one person?
No.
No. No, so St. Pete, yeah, and really a great guy, very encouraging, just super guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about the tradition.
I want to mention one other one that was on the instructor while I was there. He was in the Department of Mechanics. He taught mechanical engineering. Storman Norman Schwarzkopf, the first Gulf War. He was a major, teaching mechanics. Yeah.
You knew him when?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And later on, well, we're going to talk about Cody here in a minute. He was instrumental, with Cody, but we'll get to that here. Yeah. During that first Gulf War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are 66 through 1970. You're at West Point. Traditions. Once you get through the first year, you survive. And then what were some of the kind of the cadet traditions that you kind of would like to share? Obviously the Navy game and what you got to do during the Navy game.
Yeah, huge. That was huge. Rally after rally. Usually after dinner in the mess hall at night, they'd have all kinds of rallies, bonfire rallies, to encourage that. You'd see the football team off to the Navy game. There'd be buses there in the central area, and they'd all load up, and you'd follow the buses, all of us out the gate, all the cheering that went on. And the Corps would go to Philadelphia at the time, Soldiers Field. I don't know if you, huge concrete bowl, Soldiers Field, and it held like 100,000. But they take the whole Corps of Cadets to that. Yeah, that was quite a real event, especially in Philadelphia. Yeah.
And as I recall, you had to stay in the whole game.
Yep.
There was no sit back and relax.
Yep, there you stood the whole game, but you didn't mind. You didn't mind because you were so into it. Some of the other games that would take the Corps of Cadets to was Penn State. Yeah. And help me with the coach, the famous coach.
Paterno.
Paterno. In fact, Paterno said, the one team I fear playing is the service academies, because you never know what's going to happen. Because the day we were there, we all brought these air horns, the gas-powered air horn. Yeah, so there's like 2,000 of these things going off for every key play. I mean, it was deafening, yeah. But that was one place that always tried to take the Corps back then. And there was a pretty good football team back then. In fact, we got invited to the Sugar Bowl in 1968. We got invited to the Sugar Bowl. And the people in the Pentagon said, Vietnam War's going on, all these protests. No, we're not sending Army to the Sugar Bowl. Just wouldn't work out well. So the next morning, we were all going into the mess hall, and there's these piles of sugar all over the table, here and there. And the sugar bowls are missing. And there's this huge sign, as I told you, up on the poop deck somebody put up there. No sugar, no bowls. Somebody removed all the sugar bowls. In another tradition back then, when there was a major victory and people were all charged up, they would stack tables in the mess hall, and that would get you in major trouble. I mean, they'd just take these big dining tables, it was seat 10, and they'd just stack them one on the other as high as they could go, You did that today, you'd be in major trouble. You'd be out on the area, because that's another thing that was well used was the area, for punishment tours, which I got to enjoy a couple of times. I think.
What does that mean? I've heard the term, but I never knew what it meant.
Basically, for instance, maybe you were authorized 12 demerits a month and you got 15. So, you're 3 over, you got to walk 3 hours on the area to work it off. Yeah, so it's just in the central area. You're under full dress gray with your M14 rifle with bayonet, and you just go back and forth for an hour for each demerit. Yeah, and the officer in charge would show up to do an inspection, usually a major, and he'd line everybody up, and you just dreaded that because, oh my God, he's going to give me more demerits. I'll never get off this area. And that happened to guys. They had what they called Century Club, and that was a big deal. You got 100 hours on the area. I didn't. I had nothing to do with that kind of stuff. and they'd get a special patch to wear in their jacket. Century Club. Now I have one friend who will go nameless. He got 2 of those, 200 hours on the area. I said, you were confined to your room almost the whole time. You couldn't have enjoyed the academy. Oh, man. In fact, one of the Century Club members wrote that book, Dress Gray, Lucian Truscott IV. You probably don't remember. That was right after Vietnam in the early 70s. Got his dad, Lucian Truscott, was a colonel. His dad, Lucian Truscott the first, was one of the really famous generals of World War II with Eisenhower there, Lucian Truscott. But his grandson, oh, he was hell. He almost got thrown out a couple times. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about that, but yeah.
Why not? It's statute of limitations.
Statute, you know, and he didn't stay in the Army, obviously, you know. That's funny because sometimes, you know, these guys would come in and they were generals' kids. And they either did very well because Dad had his foot right up their butt, or they were trying to figure out some way to get out of there because they didn't want to be there, you know. And I felt sorry for those guys, you know, that were there because Dad made them be there, you know, basically, yeah.
When you were admitted to West Point, which is a free ride, 4 years, what's your commitment?
It's still the same. It's 5 years. It's 5 years. You'd agreed you'd serve 5 years. And in fact, now they've even changed that. Because back then there was like a raffle, like a lottery for your branch when you graduated. It wasn't automatic, you know, oh, I want to be infantry. That wasn't automatic because there would be only so many slots and they'd have a lottery to pick that, you know, basically. Now they'll let you pick your branch if you agree to an additional 2 years. So you're going to have a 7-year commitment, you know. If I want to be infantry, okay, you got it, 7 years, you know.
That's 4 plus 3. I mean, is that, when you talk about the number of years, it's the 4 years of the academy plus 1, or 4 plus 5?
Oh, it's when you graduate, you're going to serve 5 years active duty.
So the sum total is like 9.
Yeah.
I got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. So you get to that point, you have a degree in did you say military engineering?
Yeah, it's mechanical engineer. It's a lot of mechanical, electrical, civil. It's a real smattering of stuff, I'll tell you.
But everybody gets the same degree.
Yeah, not anymore though. They've changed all that. Yeah.
And then do they sit you down and say, what would you like to do next? I mean, do you have choices, or do somebody hand you a slip and say, enjoy the next 5 years?
They take you in the auditorium, one of the auditoriums that will seat all the seniors, and you sit there. There's a big board up there, and there are 150 slots in the infantry, maybe 100 in the armor, maybe there's 30, you know, in military police. Anyhow, like I say, and the number one man in the class, he gets to stand up first. I want the Corps of Engineers. That's typically what the number one man took, the Corps of Engineers. Okay, and they pull that one down, throw it in the basket. And depending on, you know, as they weed through that, what's left is what you're going to get, you know, what your choice. Yeah, that's how it worked.
And that's based on class rank?
Yeah, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Still does that way?
No, because now they've said, what are your top 3 choices? They try to give you one of those 3 choices unless you agree to serve 5 plus 2 more.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you know, they've changed that too. Well, that's good.
So
that's good.
What happened to Paul Fardink?
I wanted to be infantry. I said to myself, if you're going to be in the Army, you're going to be an infantry, you're going to be an airborne ranger, you know, you're going to eat snakes and go the whole way, you know. No, I figured that's the ultimate soldier, you know, in my opinion it was, yeah. So infantry, it was Vietnam era, that didn't go out very quick, you know. Yeah, so I got infantry, you know, that's what I wanted. It was funny, what got ranked then was the air defense artillery. The guys at the very bottom of the class got air defense artillery. Why? Because in Vietnam, they had these air defense ground systems, you know, these multi-barrel miniguns at the home of the infantry, Fort Benning, Georgia at the time. You know, that's where the airborne and ranger and pathfinder, you know, all those courses were at Fort Benning. So that was the first stop, you know. Following that was the 1st Infantry Division in Fort Riley, Kansas. They just come back from Vietnam because it's 1972 now. 1971, I'm sorry, the beginning of 71. So I'm at Fort Riley. And I spent a year there, and I kept applying for flight school because I did take that test, prior to leaving the academy. But you are not allowed to be an aviator. It was not a combat arms at the time. You had to serve 2 years in one of the combat branches. Then you could apply for flight school, which I did and got in. So I was at Fort Walters, Texas, primary flight school in '72, and then at Fort Rucker to finish up flight school. Graduating in January of '73 with orders for Vietnam. Again, I was on orders a couple times. But, the first time I went to flight school, I got diverted there because there was such a need for helicopter pilots. Because Vietnam was the helicopter war, basically. And I'm signing out of Fort Rucker, and I remember the major, the company commander came over, "Don't go anywhere. We just got word Kissinger's had the great peace in Paris, the peace in our time." Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yep. And you can go on leave, but make sure I've got your phone number. Make sure your assignment officer in Washington has your phone numbers, and we'll determine what's going to happen to you. Because everybody before me, in the classes before me, they all ended up in Vietnam, and that's where I thought I'd go. But it just happened. I didn't. Yeah, craziness.
What was the feeling in the military at that point? I know that you're signed up duty, but you can't avoid the politics. I mean, news is everywhere. The demonstrations, you name it, it was going on, and you're in uniform.
I know.
Did you feel the political stress?
Oh, tremendously. Because I remember at the academy, we were asked, when you go outside these gates, we prefer you don't wear a uniform because you're going to maybe have some trouble. And I remember the Armed Forces Day parade in 1970 in New York City, because the Corps cadets would go down there and they'd always lead the Armed Forces Day parade. 5,000 of New York's finest were arm in arm, along the parade route, the police, because of what was going on, oh my God, just throwing stuff at us and stuff, So that was not a fun time. In fact, here I am graduating from Airborne and Ranger. I'm at Fort Riley, Kansas, 1st Infantry Division. And okay, we're going to prepare to fight the war in Europe. No, we trained for crowd control. As a platoon leader, I would train with my platoon to get in a wedge formation, and go through crowds, riots and stuff. That's what we were training for. A horrible time. Oh, I'm so glad that's over, Greg. I mean, right now, in 2025, you can say, well, things are pretty tough, but boy, it was horrible back then. Yeah. Vietnam, that was horrible. Yeah. I never had to use my platoon to deploy them in any kind of riot situation, thank God. Thank God. Yeah.
So you get the word, the Kissinger peace in our time, Paris Peace Accord.
Yeah.
And you go home on a leave,
yep.
And all of a sudden, I don't want to say your world's turned upside down, but what you were intended to do is changed.
Yeah.
Was that in your own mind's eye as to what your path was going to be as a military guy?
This will sound crazy. This will sound nuts maybe. But when I'm home and the assignment officer called me, and he asked me where I'd like to go, and I said either 101st, because that's the helicopter division, or the 82nd Airborne, He goes, God, he goes, you're crazy. I'll never forget that. Yeah. And, I was crying. Basically, tears came to my eyes because everybody I knew, all my buddies and everybody had gone to Vietnam, and I didn't, and I felt guilty. And my mother's, she's standing there crying. I said, why are you crying? She goes, because you're not going. Yeah, good old moms, Yeah.
Well, it was a tough time.
Yeah. So I ended up in the 101st at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The world's only air assault division. 422 helicopters, and it was a great experience. And they thought they were still at war. I thought the way they trained. My God. Yeah. So
your maneuvers were done there, or did you go elsewhere for the maneuvers?
Yeah, you'd go elsewhere. For instance, we did a lot with the 82nd because, being the other airborne division, there was a lot of competitiveness, and we'd go on maneuvers at Fort Bragg, and they'd come to Fort Campbell, back. That was done a lot, and then various other places we would go. Yeah. A lot of summertime support. Like there's always a unit going to West Point, you know, for their summer training up there, and things of that nature. You'd support the National Guard a lot too, you know, especially in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
So once you get through that, you get your is there certification? Is it a pilot certification? Is that, what's the term I should be using?
No, it's true. It's a pilot. Yeah, Army aviator they like to be called, okay, rather than pilots. Yeah. You know, okay. They'll say, well, the Army. You know, the Air Force has pilots. The Army has aviators.
Okay. Thank you, walking me through this. So you literally you're doing helicopter work.
Yeah. Yeah, I was assigned to the 101st Aviation Battalion. Again, UH-1 Hueys. I think almost everybody's probably ridden in a Huey helicopter. Yeah. And, you know, Cobras, the H-1G gunships, you know, Chinooks, also the Little Birds. Yeah. I should mention, Cody was there.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up being a division commander of the 101st, you know, later on. And I should go back to West Point because that's where I really met Cody, Dick Cody.
Dick Cody, yeah.
When I was a, junior, which they call cow. I still don't know where that came from. Cow. Okay, you're a cow. A freshman's a plebe. Sophomore is a yearling, and then your seniors are firsties. So they all had these nicknames. But then I'm a cow, I'm a squad leader, because now you're getting more into the leadership roles, you know, with the junior cadets. And here comes Dick Cody. He's in my squad as a plebe. And that's how I met Dick Cody in 1968. And he was rambunctious and just full of spirit. And I says, Dick, you know, I remember what it was like being a plebe and how tough it is. So I kind of took him under my wing a bit, you know, and kind of protected him because God, this guy's got energy and he's fearless. And he's got to protect that a little bit. He's going to get in major trouble, which he did off and on, which he did. He ended up on the area. You know?
Well, you know, I saw him on the segment you sent me, which was terrific.
Yeah.
But he looks like you. I mean, there's a certain kind of middle linebacker, Paul Fardink, Dick Cody look.
He's a tough hombre, I'll tell you. Yeah. Boy, he is. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that segment. Yeah,
it was terrific. So that's where you connected with Dick. So Dick's a couple years younger than you.
2 years, yeah.
2 years. So.
And we stayed in contact almost the whole time, you know, because we ended up being good buddies. You know, we did.
So your paths did cross again down in when you were in helicopter school.
Yeah, because where they really crossed was he was injured, and he was an exception when he graduated from West Point. He could not go combat arms because of his medical condition. And he was branched into one of the service categories, the Transportation Corps, which at the time was not considered upfront combat, you know, units. So he was TC. And later on in my career, in '78, I transferred to the Transportation Corps. Why? Because I was an infantry officer, and to be honest, they could have cared less about their Army aviators. There was no aviation branch. You know, it was an additional duty. You had to fly so much to maintain your status, and they could care less about all that. You know, they wanted you to command infantry units, and God bless them, I understand all that, but I branch transferred to Transportation Corps, and Dick was in the Transportation Corps, so we crossed paths several times there, because we were both at Fort Eustis at the test pilot course at the same time. You know, because as a Transportation Corps officer, you're a maintenance test pilot. You know, when guys work on the helicopters, you're going to take them out and fly them and make sure they're okay. Yeah, so you put them through all their maneuvers and stuff. And that was quite an experience too, was the test pilot course. Yeah, but he was there at the same time. And we were both captains then too. Yeah, yeah.
So let's continue on your path, your life path in the military, because you're staying quite a bit longer, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because after Fort Campbell in '75, I went to the Infantry Officers Advanced Course. I was at Fort Benning, the home of the infantry, and I'm still an infantry officer, obviously. And I said, I want to stay here. I want to work with the Rangers and the Airborne and all this good stuff. And out of my graduating class, I think there was 208 of us. I was the only one assigned to Fort Benning, and I was just happy as heck. And my wife was mad as a hornet. She wanted to go back to Fort Campbell. I still can't figure out how come I'd end up in Germany or something, on a long tour overseas. But they said, no, you're a pilot. There's slots here. Stay at Fort Benning. So I got to stay there, and I'm glad I did, because I was in the 121st, the Sock Train Tigers. Benning's the only lift company that did all the school support for all those agencies. And later on, I was in the 478th Heavy Helicopter Unit there too. And that's those big sky cranes, those Sikorsky sky crane helicopters. Oh, magnificent. That was, I'm proud to be called a crane pilot. But the Army got rid of those because there were only 88 of those in the service, and logistically, they just weren't supportable. They all used the tandem rotor Chinooks for the heavy lift now. But that was quite an experience. And following that, when I branch transferred to TC, Transportation Corps, I was at Fort Eustis. That's with Cody again, at that AMOC course. And then they sent me to the DMZ, the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. Yeah, at Air Cav unit, Air Cav, just like you see on Apocalypse now with the Cav coming in. That's the kind of unit it was. 10 Cobra gunships, 9 Scout helicopters, and 8 Hueys for the lift element of it there. And we were right up on the DMZ. That was 24/7. You didn't go anywhere. You were locked and loaded, because it was hot back then. That was quite a trying time, because we're up on the DMZ in Korea, and President Park had just been assassinated. So all of a sudden, all these tanks are rolling south off the DMZ back down to Seoul. Tank unit after unit, and we're up there all alone now, on the DMZ, the 2nd Infantry Division. And what the hell's going on? Well, all these generals in charge of these different Korean units need to show their allegiance to whoever's going to become the next president. So they're all back down there for the defense of Seoul. And they left us up here alone. Boy, I said to myself, if there's ever an opportunity for the North to come across, this is it right now, But it didn't happen. Now, this is what I was told later on. I says, why didn't they? Well, for 2 reasons. Number one, the North Korean Army, it's October now, or November, I can't remember, and they're all off harvesting the rice. Yeah, they let their soldiers go off to harvest the rice, because that's what they live on. And number 2, Carter at the time, the president, had made a deal with North Korea that they would get 20 mainframe IBM computers of some type, if they would be good, Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they were telling us anyway, But no, that all resolved itself. And that's right during the hostage also. Remember, the same time is when Tehran, in Iran, all hell broke loose at our embassy there. That happened the same time too. Boy, that was quite a period there. The fall of '79, but things settled down. Things settled down, and it turned out okay. But there was a lot of shooting back and forth. I can remember, seeing dead Americans. Especially one night, where they killed 3 Americans. I'd call home, Cheryl, it's okay, I'm okay. What are you talking about? Because it was never in the media at home. Right. All this shooting back and forth. In fact, one night I saw just a bunch of North Korean soldiers just all lined up. There were over 200 of them dead, up there in the D. I said, what is this? Well, it's part of their graduation ceremony, where they come across and try to infiltrate, and we caught them. Oh, okay, good work. And I can remember being invited to the New Year's Eve party up at DMZ, at Panmunjom. And there's an officers club there. It's very quaint, I'll say that. And it had bullet holes across the one wall there where they'd been shooting at them. God. You can remember the axe murders, too, that happened up there during the tree clearing, 1976. So there was still a lot of residual resentment and fear over that. Because we always kept the Cobras, always kept 2 of them right there, loaded with their rockets and miniguns. They were ready to go. And lots of times, for nothing, no other reason, they'd have a show of force. They'd be up there on the DMZ flying around, letting the North Koreans know, yeah, we're ready. Yeah, craziness.
Paul, because you were a pilot,
Yep.
Did you fly mostly, or were you at a rank where you could have other people be the pilot? I mean,
No, I was still flying as a captain at the time because, you know, most of your Army pilot aviators are warrant officers, you know, but commissioned officers such as myself, a captain, you're usually in charge of a platoon or a company. You know, you're in charge of a bunch of pilots. Yeah, but you still had flying. It wasn't until you got to be a senior officer that you were restricted, you know, from being in the cockpit, especially if you were a general. If you were a general and you were going to fly a helicopter, you had to have an instructor pilot along with you. You know, it's just a precaution because, you know, they didn't fly much, you know. But typically that's it. No, but I flew a lot in Korea because I was a maintenance officer. You know, I was they'd fix the birds and I'd take them out and ring them through the, you know, it was unique too because I climbed to 10,000 feet to do the engine topping check in the Huey. And they had this little scope on the console, the APR-39, and it would paint the different strobes looking at you, the enemy radars from the north. And that thing would just light up like a Christmas tree. And I'm up there, way up there at altitude. And I said, man, by the grace of God, you know, if they ever wanted to, I didn't have a chance. You know what I mean? Yeah, but you could look at all these guys looking at you.
Were you ever in a situation where there was actually live fire against anything you were flying?
Yeah, that one night that the 3 Americans were killed, you know, that was a hot time up at the DMZ there. That was all up in the...
Were you up? Did you go up?
Yeah.
Pilot? Did you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But it was at night, so you really couldn't see, you know, who was shooting at you and stuff. You'd see the flash of the muzzles. There was no real night vision stuff back then, you know, that we have today. Yeah. So high pucker factor, and you just thank God when you landed, you know. Yeah.
At some point, is Cheryl saying, Cheryl for the cameras is the name of his wife, said, enough's enough, Paul, I really want you home?
Yes. Yeah, she was good when I was in the Army. That happened when I came home and retired because she wanted to come back here. And the first person that approached me was Sheriff Joe Gerasi, who had all these Hueys. He was flying them as medevac helicopters. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
He goes, you got all this time in a Huey, you want to fly? And I says, you're darn right I do. And Cheryl goes, yeah, that's when she really put her foot down. She said, haven't you had enough, you know? Haven't you had enough of this stuff? So I didn't. I turned him down, regretfully, because they were all Vietnam-era Hueys. I can remember looking at the log books, you know, the historical records of one of those Hueys, you know, and it showed where it had been in Vietnam, and it was actually patched in one place, you know, but it had a beautiful paint job, you know.
And they were all kind of down here at WCA, weren't they?
Yeah, and there were some up at the airport. He had a reserve helicopters there, you know, because he had a couple that had the fancy paint job, and then he had a couple from the New Jersey, I think it was New Jersey or Pennsylvania National Guard that sat up at the Air Force hidden in a hangar for parts and stuff, you know. Yeah.
Anyways, we still have you active service in Korea, so we might continue the life arc here, military arc.
Yeah. Okay. While I'm in Korea, it's like 2 in the morning in the charge of quarters, you know, the CQ they call them, who stays awake all night in a company headquarters, comes down and wakes me up. Hey, there's somebody in Washington who wants to talk to you. You know, so I run up there, and it's my assignment officer, because, you know, it's exactly flipped. You know, what's 2 o'clock in the morning there is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever. It's 12 hours difference. And he says, hey, it's your turn to go to graduate school. What? You know, because only 11% of the commissioned officers in the Army get a graduate degree. And I said, what are my choices? He goes, well, number 1, we need aeronautical engineers. You know, you got the engineering background. Naval Postgraduate School, Monterey, California. Okay, what's number 2? Naval Postgraduate School. I said, I'm not even going to ask for number 3. He goes, you don't have to. So obviously I said yes. You know, you're not going to turn down an advanced degree. You know.
No,
hell no. So
California?
Cheryl, yeah, in California. Right there in Monterey, right there next to Pebble Beach, you know, Spyglass, all those golf courses. Oh, Pebble Beach was fantastic. Cheryl loved Pebble Beach. You know, she'd go out there, and I was in school, and it was a tough curriculum. I don't mind saying so. Aeronautical engineering, again, all this advanced mathematics again. But she made a lot of friends, especially at Pebble Beach. You know, the Doris Days, the Florence Pepperdines, you know, Pepperdine University.
Sure.
Yeah, all these wonderful elderly ladies, and they kind of took her under their wing, you know, and she just had a marvelous time there. In fact, Ronald Reagan showed up one day, and he had these remember the jelly beans? He loved jelly beans, and she still has this jelly bean dipped in gold on a necklace.
I'll be darned.
Yeah,
That's
that he gave her. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But no, 2 years in Monterey, graduated, you know, with a degree in aeronautical engineering. There were 11 Army guys there in a curriculum with about 140 some naval guys, you know, naval aviators. Yeah, and it was demanding. You know, I had to work. You know, there was no gimmies there at that. No. But again, I made a lot of friends. You know, I could say I spent 2 years with the Navy, even though I wasn't on a ship. But I still, to this day, some of my best buddies are Navy officers from there. Yeah.
Was there any, along the way, a pressure to, I mean, aside from Cheryl, to kind of muster out, I mean, as far as just active service? Did they kind of say it's time to move on, or is there any of that conversation going on?
Not with me, but with others. Yeah, I saw it happen several times.
Yeah.
Several times, especially after Vietnam, when they downsized in '73 when I was in the 101st. You know, aviation companies were heavy on commissioned officers. There were 8, and RIF, reduction in force, came down right after Vietnam. We lost all 8 commissioned officers, all 8, just like that. Why? Because they took direct commissions, you know, as warrant officers in Vietnam. And I can remember my platoon commander, I was a lieutenant at the time, a captain, Leslie Nelson, standing there in tears. You know, we were in the field at the time, and he was just bawling his eyes out because he loved helicopters, Army aviation, and he did not want that. Yeah, that was a big one too. Then there was one when I was in the the 1st Infantry at Fort Riley. There was a small one there, lost several officers. You know, it's funny you talk about losing officers. Yeah, in grad school, we did lose some in grad school. It was tough, that curriculum. I don't think I can handle this. Geez, if I quit, that's the end of my career. So I'll just resign, you know. I saw that happen. And the Navy guys were the funniest. You can remember your own grad school probably. You had to finish a thesis. If you didn't do that, no degree. And I'd see guys do all the coursework and then no thesis, you know. And I remember one naval guy I became friends with, you know, did not get his degree, didn't complete his thesis. He's in talking to the colonel or the commander in charge of the naval officers there. He said, "Okay, I got your orders. Where am I going, sir?" "Guantanamo." "Gitmo. Anybody that can't complete their degree goes to Gitmo." That's your reward. I can never forget. I'll never forget the expression on his face, you know, to knowing he was going to Cuba.
Oh,
God. Yeah, but I saw that happen a couple times. Yeah, reduction in force. I mean, it never happened to me. No. Because being a West Point grad, I won't say you're protected, but I think you were valued. You know, no one ever said that, but I could sense it, you know. Yeah.
So how long did you stay in?
20 years exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because after grad school, I was basically in aviation research and development a couple different places, working with a bunch of highly educated civilians at different laboratories and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the last assignment was Low Observables Deputy Director. That's stealth for the Army, their office. And I just completed 20 years. You know, I could retire as a lieutenant colonel because you got to do 3 years in the rank to retire in that rank. And I said to Cheryl, "Well, here's my orders for Carlisle." You know, yeah, because you got to do that if you're going to be a full colonel. Because I was on the list, right? And she says, "No." She goes, quote, "I don't know about you, but I only signed up for 20, unquote." I said, "What?" Because I thought, well, okay, I'll retire. I'll stay here and work for a Beltway bandit, you know, because in D.C., that's easy to get a job down there. Yeah. And she goes, "No, I want to move back to your hometown. I want to go back to Jamestown, New York. I think that's the greatest place in the world." Blew me away. It did. Yeah. Yeah, and she loves it here to this day. She loves this area, and everything about it, even the winters.
God bless her.
Yeah.
So you come back, and it's around 1990 then?
1990, yeah.
And then what do you do?
I was hired to run the test lab, the test facilities at Blackstone, which became Valio, the French-owned company. Because I'd interviewed there a year before. I'd been home, and my uncle had sent me an advertisement. They were advertising for engineers because the French had just purchased Blackstone, and they really wanted to bulk up the engineers. So I interviewed, and they waited a whole year for me. They did. God bless them. And they put me in charge of the testing, that climatic wind tunnel. The wind tunnel. The test lab itself, with 40-some technicians and engineers, testing the radiators and charge air coolers and condensers, and also the materials chemistry lab too. So it was quite an organization. That was a great experience, And it was after 2 years of doing that, Jim Sorensen, a very good friend of mine, West Point class of '64, was the plant manager at Valio, passed on. Cancer. God, what a great guy too. Super, super guy. We were great friends too. And Per Svantesson, who was the GM. Do you remember Per? You have to remember Per.
Absolutely. Remember Jim?
Yeah. He came up to me and he goes, we just lost Jim, and consider being the plant manager. And I'm in a test lab. And I don't know anything about manufacturing. No, you don't want me. All these guys are politicking for the job, and I wasn't. I really don't want it. I've never been in manufacturing. You, Paul, will learn. You will learn. I need a leader. I need somebody to control this union. Oh, God, I hope the union guys don't hear that. But we have had a history of union issues, and that's your job, is to keep the lid on things. Oh, I can do that. Yeah, try to anyway, because they were all afraid of a colonel coming on the shop floor, which there was no need for it. But I was the plant manager then almost 5 years at Valio. Been to Paris, for their conferences, God, at least 12, 15 times. Been to the top of the Eiffel Tower more than I can remember, more fingers than I have on my two hands, But after that, MRC reached out to me. Mike Mistretta, you remember Mike?
I do.
Yeah. He was the HR, and he goes, I don't want to sound like I got a big ego here, but he goes, you got a good reputation here at Valio. We need a plant manager. We're losing ours at MRC down there in Faulkner plant, the bearings plant there. Are you interested? And I didn't know, but he made it interesting, you know what I mean, with the offer. So I jumped ship. And that was kind of a hard decision, because I really enjoyed Valio. I did at the time. We were really, Industry Week visited us and said, hey, we could put you in the competition for America's best plants, 10 best plants in America, because you guys are right up there. Because I'd filled out all the questionnaires and stuff. And that was kind of gratifying to have that experience. But I ended up at MRC. But I only stayed there a year because I had another opportunity to do this performance-based government for Chautauqua County, CPP. I still don't know why I did that. That politics is rough. You know what I mean?
Change is rough.
Change is rough. You can turn lead into gold, and people are going to oppose you and be bitter about it. Just that was incredible too. But I did that for a while with the National Labor Management Association. Yeah, but then did that for a couple of years, and then finally in 2004, I was asked to interview with Paul Chisana, because Allied Industries, the part of the resource center that makes all the military products, was really struggling with inventory systems, especially inventory. And he says, that's your background. You interested in working here? And I said, yeah. So I took that job and put an MRP system in place at Valio, Valio, TRC. And again, boy, that was a lot of work though. But everything was on spreadsheets. You can imagine handling, $20 million in contracts, and your typical product's going to cost $200, and you got to put all these components in it, and everything's on an Excel spreadsheet. And I go, oh my God, and it was chaos. We did the first inventory when I first got there, the year-end inventory, and there was a discrepancy of $1.5 million that couldn't be accounted for. And I go, oh my God. And so it was a lot of work to correct all that. But we did. We got an Epicor system in place, material requirements planning, MRP. And now the numbers are world class, the inventory accuracy. And you can ask Denise Jones, we're really proud of where that's come. Yep. But I stayed there and did a lot of stuff for manufacturing. Now, today, I'm still there, 20 years later, contract employee, 1 year at a time, because I told him, that's the way I prefer to be on a contract. You can terminate it any time if I'm not meeting expectations. But for 20 years, Greg, they've renewed it every year. It is. But I do a lot of stuff now with IDD, the Intellectual Development Disability folks, with the IRAs and the ICFs. You know all about that world. Boy, God bless them all that we even got something like that.
It's remarkable. Sidebar, but I can remember joining the board 1977. My boss, Sherry Cadwell, had been one of the forming attorneys there, and he says, "You're the young kid. You play with Mike Raymond. He's too much energy for
Oh
me."
boy, I've heard the stories.
That was the beginning of a whole career. And I don't want to get away from what we're doing here, but here we are, almost 50 years I've been somewhat involved with the Resource Center, and you just simply say I can remember passing the first budget for $1 million. $1 million was our, wow. We are going to be $1 million. And at one point or two, when the contracts are really going off, it was well over $100 million. Insane.
Yeah.
And doing it all to help developmentally disabled, and now they're treated as valued human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's such a difference.
I think that's why I'm still there, because every day I'm surrounded, with some of those folks, the ones that can do the janitorial work, and they're all so friendly, they're checking on you, it's a fantastic place, and I'm 77 years old, and I'm still going there 4 days a week. How busy I get there sometimes, because we postponed this a couple times, but I couldn't think of anything doing else. Plus, I get to meet active duty soldiers and Marines and air. They come in to spec the product, Yeah, and it's great. It's great.
They got to salute. Like you. You do so much for the community, Paul, and on behalf of the military. Let them know that Colonel Fardink remembers, and you're part of it. You speak, you present, you do all the right things, but you don't wear it on your sleeve. And that's just a real credit to you and your service, and go Army.
Yes, go Army. And I'll just say, that was one thing that they really drilled into us at West Point, You serve, even after you retire, you serve for life, And it's not about having an ego either. Keep that subverted somewhere, and stay out of politics. You've seen it with general officers that get in politics and run for office. It's deadly. Stay out of it. Yeah. Stay middle of the road.
Well, thanks, Paul. I really appreciate this.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.